Hello friends, welcome to the session on circular internal migration in India. This session has 4 objectives. First, to understand the relationship between circular migration and development. Second, to discuss the typologies and dimensions of circular migration. Third, to provide an estimate on the size of a migrant workforce in India. And fourth, to develop an insight about the impact of policies on circular migrants. The key themes and issues to be covered in this session are circular migration and development, conceptual definition of a circular migration, typologies of a circular migration, coping and accumulative migration, dimensions of a circular internal migration, finally policies impacting on circular migrants. To begin with, India is on move all over by thousands of circulatory migratory routes between villages within the same district, across districts and across states. Internal migration in India is more important than international migration in terms of the numbers of people involved and possibly even the volume of remittances. Temporary internal migration is more likely to involve the poor, the lower caste and less educated, and it has large implications for poverty reduction and meeting the sustainable development goals. Circular movement is a routine part of the livelihood strategies for people living in the marginal areas such as drought-prone areas and villages and forested areas. There are several definitions on circular internal migration. The most important definition comes from W. Zelinsky, 1971, who defines circular migration as a great variety of movements, usually short-term, repetitive or cyclical in nature, but all having in common the lack of any declared intention of a permanent or long-lasting change in residence. Similarly, J. A. Bustamante, 2000, defines circular migration as a process through which a migrant, legally or not, alternates his or her place of residence between origin or destination country until eventually settling down in either of them due to age or family reunion. Based on the notion of a migrant migration career history defined as a sequence of loops, complete or not. Desinker and Farrington in 2009 opined that circular internal migration is a multi-locational livelihood strategy adopted in rural India, a triple win situation for origin, destination and migrant. It is a self-sustainable, voluntarily adopted process where government need not to reinforce too much governance machinery and resources. Circular internal migration at its optimum level not only fulfill the labor requirement at destination but also alleviate poverty at the origin and improve the condition of the internal migrants. In the literature on circular internal migration, we come across a concept called footloose labor. An important voice in the debate on circular migration has been that of John Bremen, a sociologist who saw labor migration as the only survival option for people who were alienated from their land in the transition to capitalism. He found that on account of a slow growth and stagnation in job creation in agriculture, rural workers are moving from rural area to urban economy. Much of what he talked about in his book Seasonal Migrants and Footloose Labor has become extremely relevant today in the context of understanding the mobility in India's workforce. United Nations Economic Commission for Europe 2016 identified 5 dimensions of a circular migration, such as repetition of a move, that is frequency, directionality related to the direction of a moves, time refers to both duration of a stay of the circular migrants and to the time period over which the circulatory is addressed. Fourth, purpose or reason for move, either for work or for study or training or any other reason. And fifth, developmental impact. Circular internal migration not only fulfill the labor requirement at destination but also alleviates poverty at the origin and improves the well-being of the internal migrants. Now let us try to understand the source and destination of migrants where do the migrants come from, and finally where do they landed and settle in the Indian cities. The lead source states such as Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Uttarakhand and Tamil Nadu. These are the states from where we see a migratory movement of internal migrants to other states. Key destination states include Delhi, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Haryana, Punjab and Karnataka. Migrants are mostly employed in construction, domestic work, textile, bricklaying work, transportation, mines and agriculture. Most short-term migrants belong to socio-economically marginalized groups such as scheduled caste, scheduled tribes having negligible educational attainment, limited asset and resource deficits. Migrants face denial of basic entitlement including access to subsidized food and housing, drinking water and sanitation, public health facilities, education and banking services, and often work in poor conditions devoid of social security and legal protection. Desinker and Farrington 2009 classified two kinds of circular migration. First, circular migration by the poor and the least educated, mainly for survival reasons, which is defined as coping mechanism or coping migration. And the second category is the better off households with some education, assets, skills and social networks migrating for portfolio diversification, which often allows the accumulation of assets, savings and investment, which is defined as accumulative migration. A schematic presentation of the type of circular migration is presented before you. The vertical axis represents earnings and the horizontal axis represents skills and education. Migration for survival coping includes unskilled, uneducated and very poor households, especially belonging to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, child migrants belonging to these social groups. Accumulative migration includes skilled and experienced migrants with strong social network, those who belong to backward caste including the Muslims, forward caste and some scheduled caste and very few scheduled tribes. Finally, high skilled or educated mostly include the forward caste and backward caste. Now let us try to understand the estimates on the size of the migrant workforce in India. Labor migration in India tends to be circular in nature, both in short-term and long-term migration streams. The Economic Survey of 2017 has a chapter on India on the move and the churning, new evidence that looks at the number of internal migrants that travels to cities from rural to urban India. Using a new cohort-based migration metric and railway data, it reports interstate migration at 60 million. The first ever estimates of internal work-related migration using railway data for the period 2011 to 2016 indicate an annual average flow of close to 9 million people between states. Both the estimates are significantly greater than the annual average number of about 3.3 million as suggested by the successive census and other independent studies. Let us try to understand how the policies are impacting on the circular migrants. The overall policy environment in India is far from migration friendly. This is manifested in numerous rural development programs which try to offer alternative to migration. Urban development projects such as the master plans of major metropolises openly aim to keep migrants out, be that is in Delhi or Mumbai or Chennai or Kolkata. Rural employment projects such as Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act and the scheme aims to reduce rural-urban migration by creating jobs in rural areas. Natural resource-based management projects such as watershed development projects aim to improve the natural resource base and its capacity to sustain rural livelihoods and thus reduce out migration. So it is quite evident from the rural development policies and programs that efforts are made to check out migration, especially the rural to urban migration. To sum up, what has been discussed so far, migrants live and work in poor conditions and have no access to proper schemes such as PDS and health care. There is an enormous gap in service provision because poor circular migrants are among the poorest and the most vulnerable groups in the country. If government fails to reach them, it will affect India's prospects of reaching the sustainable development goals. Circular migration in India has grown significantly. Hence, in the policy front, the government needs to develop a protective and promotive migration sensitive policy framework. With this, I come to an end of the session on circular internal migration in India and leave you with few questions which you will find easy. Thanks for watching this video.